There once lived two households in Verona, the Montagues and the Capulets. However, these two households hold an ancient grudge on each other. For what? No one seems to know. Later that night, some of the Montagues, such as Romeo, Benvolio, Mercutio, crash the Capulets' party. As Romeo is looking around the room, he spots Juliet and instantly falls in love with her. As Romeo gazes at Juliet's beauty, he starts to mumble his love for her. As he does this, Tybalt, Juliet's cousin, overhears him and instantly knows he is a Montague and has crashed the party. As Romeo pursues Juliet, she suddenly notices him as well. Eventually, they meet up and exchange a kiss or two. However, later that night, Juliet realizes Romeo is a Montague and that she loves her enemy. After the party is over, Romeo sneaks into the garden behind Juliet's room. He overhears her profess her love for him. Romeo suddenly chimes in and shares his love for her as well. As they talk and gaze into each other's eyes, they decide to get married the next day because their love is extremely strong. The next day, Juliet and Romeo meet at Friar Lawrence's cell, a mutual friend. Friar Lawrence then marries them because he feels it might end the feud between the two brawling families. After the wedding, Romeo finds Mercutio and Tybalt dueling. As Romeo tries to break the fight up, they push him away. Tybalt then ends up killing Mercutio, and as revenge, Romeo goes after Tybalt and ends up killing him in return. Romeo then runs to Friar Lawrence's cell in fear of being exiled by the prince. But then Friar Lawrence tells Romeo that he's only been banished to Mantua since he had done what the prince would have done. While Romeo confides in Friar Lawrence, Juliet does the same with the nurse who has raised Juliet her whole life. Juliet is devastated about Romeo's banishment, but because her family does not know about her and Romeo, they assume it is only about the death of her cousin Tybalt. Because of that, her father agrees to have Juliet marry Paris. When Juliet declines the offer, Lord Capulet, her father, threatens to throw her out in the street. Eventually, Juliet decides to agree with her father and marry Paris. Later that day, Juliet runs to Friar Lawrence's to ask for help with the upcoming marriage between her and Paris. Since Friar is only one of the few who knows about Juliet and Romeo's marriage, he thinks of a plan. He gives her a potion that will put her in a heavy sleep. He tells her she is to drink the potion before she goes to bed. When she wakes up, her family will think she is dead and put her in their family tomb. However, when she wakes up from the heavy sleep, Romeo would then be there to take her back to Mantua. Later that night, Juliet takes the potion Friar Lawrence gave her and drinks it. In the morning, the nurse goes to wake Juliet up for her wedding, but instead finds her dead. The nurse calls the family in to show them the tragic news. Friar Lawrence then sets up a funeral, and after the funeral takes place, they put Juliet away in the family tomb. Balthazar, Romeo's servant, goes to Mantua and tells Romeo about Juliet's death. Romeo then travels back to Verona to see Juliet, and when he does, he drinks a potion that kills himself. When Juliet wakes up, she finds Romeo dead lying beside her. She then takes his dagger and kills herself. Later that night, the watch finds Romeo and Juliet dead. Friar Lawrence then tells both families and the prince about Romeo and Juliet's marriage. This then ends the feud between the Capulets and the Montagues.